So on this slide number 7, I'm calling remotely from a hotel room, so I'll be giving Mike the slide numbers. I'll recap some habits that we've identified as, or we've noticed that successful software teams tend to exhibit these sort of behaviors. So even though they may use a variety of different processes or approaches, there are some commonalities to the teams that are successful. So I'll recap them briefly and then go into each one of them in more detail. So the first habit is a singular focus on delivering the right working solution, and the emphasis there is on the right solution. So we'll talk a little bit about that in a moment. Second habit is actively taking actions to reduce risk. Third one is that they're focused on objective results and measurements. Fourth one is that they're steadily focused on advancing the solution in small but deliberate steps. Fifth one is that they're focused on generating results without a fear of failure, so there's some organizational context to the way they work. The sixth one is that they continuously exercise adaptive planning, so they're constantly adapting their strategies and tactics to the facts on the ground. And the seventh one is that they're always open and honest about status, progress, risks, and issues. So with that, we'll dive into the first one. So slide number 8, please. So the habit number 1, singularly focused on delivering the right working solution. And what you see here is a picture that is the mental model that I have for how a successful software team works. And if you'll notice, there's always some sort of beginning to the project, some business opportunity is presented to the team. And the first thing that they need to do is they need to spend some time understanding what the desired outcomes are. So there's a natural tendency for people on a software project, they get the project charter or they get the request coming in, and they immediately go out to the users or the business representatives and they start asking them for their requirements. But we often find that business users and the stakeholder representatives don't have a really clear picture of what they're trying to achieve. And so stepping back and taking a perspective that says, well, you know, whatever they've asked for is certainly good input, but you want to understand what the objective is, what business results they're trying to deliver, what the outcomes are. And so I like using this term desired outcomes as opposed to needs, because oftentimes when you ask for needs, you simply get a repetition of the features that they'd like to see. But if you understand needs, the outcomes, you know, it might be reduced cycle time, it might be improved revenue, it might be some other business measure, and then take it through the process, take it through the business process, and understand at each step of that process what the desired outcomes are. It will give you a much better picture on what it is that you need to deliver. So with those sort of ideas in mind, then we move on to explore solutions. And so every problem generally has more than one way that you can solve it, and each way of solving it will have different pros and cons, different advantages, disadvantages. And so we like to spend a little bit of time not simply jumping to one particular solution, but understanding the different alternatives. It could be that that some of the alternatives involve some changes in the business process as well as additional automation. It could be that you keep the existing business process the same and simply automate it if the business process is already fairly optimized. So there's a need to explore more than one solution. And again, typically what happens on a project is that the business user comes with a particular solution in mind, and if they jump straight into requirements and you let them, then you'll simply dive straight into that solution. Well, they may not have a good idea of what the alternatives are, they may not have thought about this, so you want to spend some time exploring solutions. Then, of course, you want to evaluate those alternatives. That often leads to additional desired outcomes, and so you cycle around in that loop that I call the envisioning loop for a while. At some point, you identify an alternative that is better than all the other alternatives, and collectively with the business, you decide that that's the particular alternative that you want to pursue. So the next step is what I call augmenting the specification, because you've already been, when you're exploring solutions, you've already been identifying different aspects of the solution. So perhaps some scenarios, use cases, some requirements. So it's a notion that you're not starting afresh identifying requirements, but you're augmenting what you've already done. And I call it specifications because, in fact, you may have some specifications of the architecture by that point. So it's more than just requirements. It's actually some technical things. And as we've evaluated alternatives, there may have been some prototyping involved. So we may actually have running code. In fact, having running code at this point is a really good thing. Now, once you've augmented the specification, you do some development on that. And so in an iterative approach, you gather a bit of requirements, then you develop some of it, you evaluate results, and then you go back and gather some more requirements. So cycling through this enact loop gives us the ability to converge on the solution by refining the information that's come out of the envisioning process and actually developing working code. Of course, at some point, you decide that with the business, this is the solution that you want to pursue, that it's ready to deploy, and then you can drop out of that loop and then deploy the solution. So this particular picture is a mental model that I use for thinking about how is a team focused on delivering the right solution. They're understanding needs, they're exploring the solutions with the business, evaluating alternatives, refining that definition of the solution, and iteratively developing it, and finally delivering results. So moving on to slide number 9, then we switch our attention to the next habit. So as the team works through this process, they need to actively take actions to reduce risk. So one of the benefits of following an iterative approach is that it gives you the ability to actually test out some of your theories on what the right solution is, what the technical risks of delivering that are, and what the business risks of delivering that are. And so as you work through iterations, you want to drive those iterations not just off delivering functionality, but also reducing risk, choosing to reduce the largest risks upfront in the early iterations, and then you'd like to see sorry. You'd like to see those risks drop off over time. Something caught in my throat. So as these risks drop off over time, you see this chart that we show in the lower right. And so you'd expect to see risks rising early in the project because it takes time to understand what the real risks are. As you get farther into the understanding the business process, understanding what the real needs are, and understanding what the technology is going to be applied to that, then you find that the risks that you're encountering actually go up slightly. As you work through iterations, though, the risks should decline over the course of the project if you're actively managing towards risk. So new risks will occur. The curve won't be perfectly smooth as we see here, but if you're driving at risk, you should see that curve drop off over time. So if you see lack of downward progress on the risk curve, then it means that risks are increasing, or that perhaps your mitigation strategies aren't working the way that you expected them. So one of the things that we have to do, or that we recommend doing on an iterative project, is, so if you're using an approach like Scrum, for example, you're prioritizing the backlog based on largely on the user's input or the product owner's input. So what we want to do is, that's certainly a good thing. We want to make sure that we're keeping the business happy, but that's not the only thing that we need to be doing. So we need to balance keeping the business happy. So one of the risks is the business loses faith in the project team, and then they're not seeing adequate progress. So that would certainly be one of the risks that you should see on your risk list. But